I still remember the way my heart pounded with excitement that morning. It was our 10th wedding anniversary, a milestone I had dreamed about since the day we said, "I do." I woke up early, my mind already buzzing with thoughts of what the day would hold. I had prepared a special dinner, pulled out the bottle of wine we'd been saving since our honeymoon, and even put on the dress he once said made me unforgettable. But the real surprise came at breakfast. "Happy anniversary, Rachel," Ethan said, his eyes crinkling at the corners like they always did when he smiled. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. My breath caught in my chest. A jewelry box. My heart swelled with love, gratitude, and a sense of being seen. "You didn't have to," I whispered, tears pricking at the back of my eyes. "Of course I did," he said, grinning like a man who knew he'd just hit a home run. My fingers trembled as I opened the box, revealing a stunning gold bracelet adorned with tiny diamonds that caught the morning sunlight. It was exquisite, I gasped, pressing my hand to my mouth. "Ethan, it's beautiful," I said, my voice thick with emotion. He leaned forward, kissed my forehead, and said, "Only the best for my girl." I held back tears, feeling like the luckiest woman alive. 10 years, 2 kids, a house we'd built together, and still he looked at me like I was the only woman in the world. Felt perfect. Too perfect. Later that day, while tidying up the kitchen, I decided to try the bracelet on again. I lifted the velvet box from the counter, and as I did, something slipped out. A small folded receipt. I picked it up without much thought, assuming it was just warranty information. But then I saw it. To Natalie S. My stomach clenched. The name seared into my brain like a brand on raw skin. Natalie. Natalie? I blinked, my mind racing. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe it was a shipping error. Maybe it was. I unfolded the receipt. My hands felt numb, my vision narrowing as I read the details. 18K gold diamond bracelet. Exactly like mine. Purchased just 3 days ago. And at the bottom, just above Ethan's signature, was the note. "Happy anniversary, love. I can't wait to see this on you." The room spun. My breath grew shallow as if the air had been sucked from the house. My fingers clenched around the paper so tightly it crumpled into a ball. "Happy anniversary, love." My love? No, not my love. Someone else's love. Someone named Natalie. A rush of anger, disbelief, and raw pain surged through me. My body moved before my mind could catch up. I marched into the living room, heart pounding like a war drum. Ethan was on the couch, scrolling through his phone like nothing had changed. "Who the hell is Natalie?" I demanded, my voice cracking like a whip. He froze. Slowly, he lifted his head to look at me. His face was blank at first, like a computer trying to process a command it didn't understand. "Sorry, what?" he asked, feigning confusion. My blood boiled. I shoved the crumpled receipt into his lap. "Don't you dare wet me, Ethan." "Who is Natalie?" He stared at it for a moment too long. Long enough to tell me he knew exactly what I was talking about. Panic flickered in his eyes. A slight widening of his pupils. I'd read once that liars' eyes dilate when they're caught. "Rachel, it's not what you think," he said, his voice suddenly too soft, too calm. "Then tell me what it is," I hissed, stepping forward. "Tell me why my anniversary gift was supposed to go to Natalie. Tell me why you're only the best for my girl was meant for someone else." His jaw tensed, and for a moment, I thought he might actually try to lie. But then his shoulders slumped like a man whose secrets had finally become too heavy to carry. "She's a friend from work," he muttered. "It was just supposed to be a nice gesture. She's going through a rough time. Don't you dare," I snapped, pointing a finger at him like a loaded gun. "Do not insult me with 'she's a friend.' Friends don't get anniversary gifts. Friends don't get. I can't wait to see this on you. Do you think I'm stupid, Ethan?" My voice cracked on his name. "Do you think I wouldn't find out?" He stood up now, hands raised like I was some kind of threat. "Rachel, it's not like that. I swear. It's not what you think." "Then what is it, Ethan?" I stepped closer, eyes locked on his like I could burn through him with my stare. "Because right now all I'm thinking is that my husband, the man I built a life with, is a liar. A liar who buys jewelry for other women." His face contorted with something between anger and desperation. "I made a mistake, okay? I was stupid. It didn't mean anything." "Didn't mean anything?" I laughed bitterly, the sound hollow and jagged in my throat. Funny, because it sure as hell means something to me. He reached for me, but I jerked away like his touch was poison. Don't touch me. I turned on my heel and walked out of the room, heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst. I didn't cry. Not yet. Not while he could still hear me. I sat in the kitchen, phone in hand, heart racing. My mind was spinning with a mix of fury and the sharp ache of betrayal. Natalie. Her name felt like a thorn stuck in my chest. I had to know. I had to see her. The receipt had the name of the store. I called them. I used the sweetest voice I could muster, pretending to be a customer. Hi, I got a bracelet as a gift, but I'm not sure it's the right size. Can I bring it in for an exchange? The woman on the other end was friendly. Of course, ma'am. Just bring the receipt, and we'll be happy to help. I'll be there in 20 minutes, I said, hanging up before she could respond. I didn't tell Ethan where I was going. I left without a word. I didn't care if he knew. At the store, I showed the bracelet and the receipt to the clerk. She smiled politely. Ah, yes, I remember this one. It was such a thoughtful gift from Mr. Cooper. He was so excited about it. I froze. My skin went cold. Sorry, did you say Mr. Cooper? Yes, she said, nodding. He wanted it to be perfect for Natalie. I thought it was so sweet. My vision blurred. I had to grip the counter to steady myself. My breath was shallow, coming in short, sharp gasps. Do you know her? I asked, forcing my voice to stay calm. The clerk frowned, clearly sensing something was wrong. I think she's been in before. Young blonde, very pretty. Blonde. I felt like I was going to be sick. My heart was cracking. And I was just standing there, letting it happen. Thank you. I muttered and stumbled out of the store. I sat in my car, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I pulled out my phone. I'd seen her name on Ethan's phone once. A work text at 11 p.m. I scrolled, my fingers flying with the fury of a woman possessed. I found it. Natalie S. I called. Hello. Her voice was light, sweet, and oh so innocent. Hi, Natalie. This is Rachel Cooper, Ethan's wife. The silence on the other end told me everything I needed to know. Yeah, I said, voice steady now, sharp as a blade. We need to talk. Because here's the thing about the truth. It always finds a way out. Ethan thought he was clever. He thought he could buy a bracelet for his mistress and play the perfect husband. But lies, like receipts, have a way of slipping out of neat little boxes. The silence on the other end stretched on longer than it should have. Like she was deciding whether to hang up or face what was coming. I could hear her breathing, shallow and uneven. I pictured her standing there, eyes darting around, trying to figure out if this was some kind of prank. But it wasn't. It was as real as the weight crushing my chest. Hi, she finally said, her voice small, hesitant. I think you might have the wrong number. No, Natalie, I said, cold steel lacing every word. I don't. I know exactly who I'm calling. I know you've been seeing my husband, Ethan Cooper. I know about the bracelet. I know about the note. And I know about you. There was a sharp inhale on her end, like I'd just plunged a knife straight into her. I think there's been a misunderstanding, she stammered, her voice shaking. Don't insult me, Natalie, I snapped, gripping the phone tighter. Don't you dare play dumb with me. I saw the receipt. I talked to the store clerk. She remembers him picking it out for you. I know everything. So stop wasting both our time with your little act. Her silence this time was different. No more hesitation, no more confusion. It was the silence of someone caught red-handed, backed into a corner with no way out. When she spoke again, the sweet, innocent tone was gone. What do you want from me, Rachel? She asked, her voice sharp now, tired of pretending. Finally, there it was. The truth. No more masks. No more games. I want to know how long it's been going on, I said flatly, my eyes fixed on the dashboard as I stared ahead, unblinking. And don't lie to me. I'll find out either way. She sighed, long and heavy, like she was exhausted with the whole thing. Like she was the victim here. Her audacity made my blood boil. About a year, she admitted. And the weight of her words crashed down on me so hard I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. A year. A whole year. While I was planning birthday parties for our kids. While I was cooking dinners, folding his clothes, and asking him how his day was. He was sneaking around with her. Of course, I muttered, more to myself than to her. It all made sense now. The late nights at the office, the sudden interest in going to the gym, the unexplained texts he claimed were just work stuff. I'd brushed off every red flag, too trusting, too naive. You must feel pretty proud of yourself, I said, letting out a dry, humorless laugh. Sleeping with another woman's husband. Does it make you feel special, Natalie? Does it make you feel powerful? Look, I didn't know at first, okay? She shot back, suddenly defensive. He told me you two were having problems. He said you were practically separated. Separation. I laughed and it came out sharp, bitter and broken. Separation looks a lot like family movie nights on Fridays and soccer games on Saturdays, huh? Because that's what my life has looked like, while you were playing house with my husband. Don't act like I'm the only one to blame, she snapped. He's the one who chased me, Rachel. He's the one who told me he was unhappy. I didn't force him to do anything. And you believed him, I said, my voice as icy as the wind outside. Because it's easier to believe a pretty lie than admit you're just another woman desperate for scraps of attention from a married man. Her breath caught. Good. I wanted her to feel it, even just a fraction of what I was feeling right now. The betrayal, the humiliation, the fury so hot it made me feel cold. Look, I'm not gonna sit here and argue with you, she said, her voice strained but defiant. If you've got a problem, take it up with Ethan. He's the one who owes you loyalty. Not me. I could practically hear the smirk in her voice. The way she thought she just ended the conversation. But I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. Don't worry, Natalie, I said quietly, my tone so calm it even scared me. I plan to have a conversation with Ethan. But before I do, I wanted you to know that I'm not going to be the quiet, sweet little wife who just works it out for the sake of the kids. No, I'm going to burn it all to the ground. Him, you, and every lie he's ever told. You'll wish you'd never met him by the time I'm done. You're crazy, she muttered, but I could hear the tremor in her voice. Maybe, I said with a humorless chuckle. But I'm the kind of crazy you don't want to underestimate. I ended the call before she could respond. My heart was racing, adrenaline flooding every inch of me. My hands shook as I gripped the steering wheel, my mind buzzing with all the ways I could tear his world apart. I'd spent 10 years being his good wife. 10 years building a life together, raising kids, making sacrifices. And this is how he repaid me. I drove home slowly, my grip on the wheel so tight I thought I might snap it in half. Every mile I drove, the memories hit me like flashes of lightning. Him bringing me soup when I was sick. Him holding my hand at the doctor's office when I thought I might have cancer. Him swearing over and over that he'd always be by my side. Every moment felt like a lie now. A carefully crafted illusion to keep me complacent. When I pulled into the driveway, Ethan was already outside, pacing. He spotted the car and jogged over, his face twisted with something that might have been relief. Rachel, listen, I know you're upset, but can we just talk? Please, he said, hands raised like he was trying to calm a wild animal. I didn't get out of the car right away. I watched him through the windshield, this man I'd loved for so long. I'd memorized his face, every line and wrinkle, every freckle. I'd seen him at his best, and now I was seeing him at his absolute worst. I stepped out slowly, letting the cold air bite at my skin. I shut the car door and leaned against it, arms crossed, staring him down like I was the executioner and he was the condemned man. Talk then, I said. But choose your words carefully, Ethan, because you're standing on very, very thin ice. He swallowed hard, rubbing his hands over his face. Look, I know I messed up. I know. But it wasn't serious, Rachel. It was stupid and it didn't mean anything. I didn't want to hurt you. I let out a dry, bitter laugh that echoed in the driveway. Didn't want to hurt me? Didn't want to hurt me? You bought her jewelry, Ethan. You wrote her love notes. You sneaked around behind my back for a year. Don't you dare stand there and tell me you didn't want to hurt me. He looked away, his face twisted with shame. Or maybe just the fear of getting caught. I love you, Rachel, he said quietly, his voice cracking. I swear I love you. Don't you dare use that word, I snapped, tears burning at the back of my eyes. Love doesn't look like this. Love doesn't feel like this. I stepped closer, eyes locked on his. If you loved me, you wouldn't have humiliated me. You wouldn't have disrespected me. And you sure as hell wouldn't have given her what you promised to me. I could see him breaking down. His eyes glistened with tears. Good. Let him feel it. Let him drown in it. I took off the bracelet, the one that was supposed to be just for me, and shoved it into his chest so hard he stumbled back. Give it to her, I said, voice as sharp as broken glass. Since it was always hers anyway. I turned on my heel and walked inside, locking the door behind me. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Because I wasn't the one who'd lost everything. That was all him. He just didn't know it yet. I stood by the door for a moment, my forehead pressed against the cold wood, my breath coming in shallow bursts. My whole body felt like it had been hollowed out and filled with flames. My chest ached with every breath, but I didn't cry. Not yet. Crying would come later, maybe when the house was quiet, maybe when the kids were asleep. But right now I needed to stay sharp. My mind was electric, every thought sharper than broken glass. Through the window I could see him still standing there in the driveway, his head down, his hands on his hips like he was trying to figure out how everything had gone so wrong. He looked lost. Good. Let him stay lost. Let him stay out there in the cold. I wasn't about to be the woman who opens the door and begs him to come back in. Not this time. Not ever again. I walked into the kitchen and sat at the table, my hands flat on the surface, fingers splayed out like I needed to ground myself. My wedding ring caught the light. I stared at it for a long moment, feeling every ounce of its weight. 10 years. 10 years of devotion, love, sacrifice. I'd worn this ring like armor, thinking it meant protection, thinking it was a promise. But all it had done was mark me as a fool. Slowly, methodically, I slid the ring off my finger. The indent it left behind on my skin felt like a scar. I placed it on the center of the table, staring at it like it was some strange artifact I'd never seen before. It sat there, small and meaningless now. Just a circle of metal. Nothing more. It had meant everything once, but now it was just nothing. My phone buzzed on the table, the screen lighting up with Ethan's name. I stared at it, watching it buzz and buzz and buzz until it finally went quiet. A second later it buzzed again. This time it was a text. I didn't need to open it to know what it said. Please, Rachel. Let me in. We can fix this. We can talk. Fix this. Fix it. Fix what, Ethan? I could almost hear his voice in my head, smooth and pleading. The same tone he used on me when he forgot to pick up milk from the store, or left his socks on the living room floor. Like this was just another minor inconvenience. Like his betrayal was something a little talk could patch up. I let out a bitter, hollow laugh. Talk. Sure, let's talk. Let me explain to you how you destroyed our family while chasing after someone named Natalie. The phone buzzed again. And again. His desperation was almost pitiful. I reached for it, ready to block his number, but something stopped me. I stared at the screen at the little blinking notification. Not from Ethan. This time it was from her. Natalie. Her name flashed on my screen like a warning light, and for a second I just stared, not sure if I was imagining it. But it was real. Her message was short. Just 3 words. Are you happy? I blinked, my jaw tightening as I read it over and over. Was this some kind of joke? Was she taunting me now? I felt my breath quicken, anger rising in me like a flood. Am I happy? My fingers moved on their own, typing back so fast I didn't even think. You really want to do this right now? I sent it before I could stop myself. 3 dots appeared on the screen. She was typing. My heart thudded in my chest, each second feeling like an eternity. When her reply came, I nearly threw the phone across the room. I just wanted to know if you feel better now that you've ruined everything. I stared at the message, my eyes narrowing in disbelief. Me? I ruined everything? The audacity of this woman. My fingers hovered over the screen, and I had to take a deep breath before I exploded. I didn't ruin anything, Natalie. I just exposed it. You ruined it the second you opened your legs for a married man. I hit send, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. The kitchen suddenly felt too small, the air too thick. She didn't reply right away, and I told myself I wouldn't sit here and wait for her response like some kind of teenager waiting on a text from a crush. But I didn't put the phone down either. A minute later it buzzed. You act like you're innocent. Like you're some perfect little wife who did nothing wrong. Maybe if you'd been a better wife, he wouldn't have needed me. The words burned hotter than anything Ethan had ever done. They hit me right where they were meant to. Right in the part of me that had doubted myself for years. Maybe I wasn't enough. Maybe I was too focused on the kids. Maybe I stopped being fun. Maybe I stopped being beautiful. She knew exactly where to aim and she hit the bullseye. But something shifted in me at that moment. Something hard and unyielding. I sat up straighter, my back no longer hunched like I'd been defeated. I looked at the phone and this time I wasn't angry. I was calm. Dangerous calm. You think you've won, Natalie? You think you took something from me? You didn't. You didn't win a prize. You inherited a liar, a cheater and a coward. And when he does to you what he did to me, and trust me, he will, I hope you remember this conversation. I hope you hear my voice in your head saying, I told you so. Because men like Ethan don't change. They just find new women dumb enough to believe them. I sent it and didn't wait for her response this time. I didn't need to. She could stew in it. Let her have him. Let her deal with the man she thought she'd won. She'd learn just like I did. She'd feel it too one day. The lies. The doubt. The 3 a.m. wake-ups wondering why he isn't home yet. She'd know. And by then I'd be long gone. I stood up from the table feeling lighter somehow. My legs felt shaky, but strong enough to carry me to the bedroom. I pulled a suitcase from the closet, unzipped it and started throwing in clothes. I didn't think. I didn't plan. I just moved. Each item I packed felt like a declaration of war. Jeans. Sweaters. Socks. Get out. Get free. Get away. I wasn't going to stay here. Not for him. Not for anyone. I was done. Done waiting. Done forgiving. Done being the good wife. I wasn't that woman anymore. Ethan knocked on the front door. Rachel. Please come on. Just talk to me.
I'm sorry. Okay.
I'm so sorry. His voice cracked like a boy caught stealing from a candy jar. Pathetic. I kept packing. More knocking. Harder this time. Rachel, please. I'll do anything. Just talk to me. I'll go to therapy. I'll quit my job if you want. Just tell me what to do. I zipped up the suitcase, grabbed my coat, and headed for the front door. My hand hovered on the lock for a moment. I could hear him breathing on the other side, desperate, hopeful, still thinking he had a chance. Rachel, he said quietly, pressing his forehead against the door. Don't leave me. Please. I love you. I squeezed my eyes shut. Don't believe it. Don't believe it. I took a deep breath, unlocked the door and swung it open. Ethan stumbled back, eyes wide like he'd seen a ghost. His face was a mess, tear-streaked, pale and pathetic. I'm not leaving, I said calmly. You are. I stepped aside, pointing toward the street like I was a flight attendant showing him the emergency exit. Rachel, please, he begged, his eyes shining with tears. Don't do this. We have a family. We have history. No, Ethan, I said, my voice stronger than it had been in years. What we have is over. His mouth opened like he wanted to say something, but I didn't care anymore. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my wedding ring and placed it in his hand. It sat there cold and heavy, just like the lies he'd carried all year. Give this to Natalie, I said, looking him dead in the eyes, since she's so eager to play wife. I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. Not for him. Not for anyone. Because I wasn't the one who lost everything. That was all him. He just didn't know it yet. I didn't stop walking until I reached the end of the block. Each step felt like a release, like I was shedding the weight of every lie, every excuse, every moment I doubted my own worth because of him. The cold air bit at my skin, sharp and unforgiving, but I welcomed it. I welcomed the sting because it reminded me that I was still alive. And right now, being alive felt more important than being okay. My phone buzzed again in my pocket, and I knew without looking that it was Ethan. I didn't care. I let it buzz. Let him choke on his apologies. Let him cry. Let him beg. I was done listening. I didn't owe him my attention. Not anymore. I kept walking. I didn't even know where I was going, but it didn't matter. Anywhere was better than that house. That house where I'd scrubbed floors, hung up family photos, and folded his laundry like it was a love letter. That house where I'd waited for him to come home, convincing myself that late nights at work were just that, work. God, how stupid I'd been. How many nights had I sat at that dinner table, eating with the kids while his plate sat cold. How many times had I replayed his excuses in my head, telling myself to trust him because that's what a good wife does. I gritted my teeth, swallowing down the bitter taste in my mouth. No more. Never again. I wouldn't be that woman anymore. The one who waits. The one who doubts herself because of a man's lies. I made it to the little park at the end of our street and sat on the cold metal bench. The kind with the holes in it that always leave little marks on your thighs if you sit too long.
I sat ennui.
I needed a moment to breathe, to think, to feel something that wasn't anger or pain. But as soon as I sat down, it all came rushing in like a flood. Tears. Hot and heavy. They came without warning, without mercy. One blink, and they were falling down my face like rain, fast and steady. I wiped them away with my sleeve, but it was no use. They just kept coming. My shoulders shook, and for a moment I hated myself for it. I hated that even after everything, he still had this power over me. He'd broken me. And here I was, crumbling like a sandcastle at high tide. I pulled my knees up to my chest, wrapping my arms around them like I was trying to hold myself together. I rocked back and forth, biting down on my lips so hard I tasted blood. My breath came in ragged, uneven gasps. I didn't want anyone to see me like this. If someone walked by right now, I'd look like some fragile, broken woman. And that's not who I wanted to be. But grief doesn't care about pride. It just takes and takes until you have nothing left. I cried for everything. For the 10 years I'd spent building a life with a man who was never really mine. For every moment I'd chosen patience over my own peace. For the version of me who still believed that love was enough. My phone buzzed again. This time, I pulled it out, ready to turn it off, ready to block Ethan for good. But it wasn't him. It was a message from my sister, Emily. Hey, just checking in. You okay? My breath hitched in my throat. Emily. She always knew. It didn't matter how far apart we were, or how many times I'd told her, I'm fine. She could feel it. Older sisters have a way of knowing when you're about to break. I stared at the message for a long time before my fingers finally moved. No. I'm not okay. 3 dots appeared right away. She didn't wait. She never did. Where are you? I'm coming to get you. I told her I was at the park. And within 10 minutes, I saw her old blue Honda pulling up to the curb. She didn't even park it properly. Just threw it into park with half the car still in the street. She got out, slamming the door behind her, her eyes scanning the area like she was ready to fight someone. When she saw me sitting on that bench, her face softened. She walked over slowly, her arms already open, and I didn't hesitate. I stood up and walked straight into her embrace. I hadn't hugged her like this in years. Not since our mother died. I clung to her now like she was the last piece of solid ground I had left. Her arms wrapped around me tight. One hand on the back of my head like I was a child who'd just woken up from a nightmare. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. She just held me. When I finally pulled away, I wiped my face, suddenly self-conscious about the mess I must have looked like. But Emily didn't care. She never did. She just tilted her head, looking me dead in the eyes like she could see every broken piece of me. What did he do? She asked softly, but there was steel in her voice. Emily was the type to stay calm, until it was time to burn the world down. I laughed short and bitter, wiping my face again. You want the short version or the long version? Whichever one ends with me slashing his tires, she said without missing a beat. I smiled for the first time that day. It was small, barely there, but it was real. I shook my head, letting out a breath that felt like it had been trapped in my lungs for hours. He's been cheating, I said, my voice flat. For a year. With some girl named Natalie. Emily's eyes flashed with rage. Pure unfiltered rage. A year? That slimy, lying piece of... She stopped herself, taking a deep breath like she was physically holding herself back. Where is he now? At the house, I said. Probably still standing on the porch, crying like I'm supposed to feel sorry for him. Her jaw tightened. You want me to handle it? The way she said it, so calm, so certain, made me want to cry all over again. Not because of Ethan this time, but because of her. Because of the way she always showed up for me. No matter how messy it got. No matter how many times I swore I could handle it alone. She always showed up. I shook my head. No. I'm done handling him. I glanced at my phone, scrolling past Ethan's texts without reading them. I'm done being the one who cleans up his messes. Good, Emily said firmly. About damn time. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out her car keys, jangling them in front of me. Come on, let's get out of here. You're not staying in that house tonight. I opened my mouth to argue, but the words didn't come. She was right. I didn't want to go back there. Not tonight. Not ever, if I was being honest. That house had stopped feeling like a home the moment I found that receipt. Yeah, I muttered, finally giving in. Let's go. We got in her car, and she cranked up the heat. The warmth hit my face, melting away the cold that had seeped into my bones. Emily glanced at me as she backed out of the parking spot, her eyes flicking to my hands. Where's your ring? She asked. I smiled faintly, looking down at my bare finger. Gave it back. Her eyebrows shot up. To him. Yep. Her grin was sharp and wicked. Damn, I wish I'd seen that. I leaned back in the seat, finally letting myself breathe. For the first time all day, I felt like I had control again. Not over him. Not over what had happened. But over me. My choices. My future. My peace. We drove in silence for a while, and for once silence didn't feel heavy. It felt clean. Like a blank page waiting for something new to be written. Emily reached over and squeezed my hand just once, and I squeezed back. You're gonna be okay, she said, eyes still on the road. You know that, right? I didn't answer right away. I just watched the world pass by outside the window, streetlights blurring like stars. Yeah, I finally said, my voice steady and certain. I know. And I did. For the first time in a long time, I really did. Emily drove us in silence for a while, the soft hum of the engine the only sound between us. I leaned my head against the cold window, watching streetlights flicker by like distant stars. The world outside felt quiet, steady, nothing like the storm still raging inside me. My chest was tight, my thoughts loud. But with every mile we put between that house and us, it got a little easier to breathe. I didn't know where we were going, and I didn't ask. I trusted Emily. She always knew what to do when I didn't. Older sisters have a way of doing that, being calm when you're chaos, being strong when you're breaking. I'd always envied that about her. She never seemed to second-guess herself the way I did. You hungry? She asked suddenly, glancing at me from the driver's seat. I thought about it for a second, then realized I couldn't even remember the last time I ate. I'd spent the whole day planning our perfect anniversary like an idiot. I'd been so focused on making him feel loved, I forgot about myself. Yeah, I said quietly. Starving, actually. Good, she said, flicking on her turn signal. I know just the place. She pulled into a little diner off the highway. One of those places that's open 24/7 with a neon open sign that buzzes just a little too loud. The kind of place where the coffee is always a little burnt but the pancakes taste like childhood. I hadn't been here in years, but as soon as we stepped inside, I was hit with the familiar smell of syrup, bacon grease, and strong coffee. It felt like home in a way that my house never would again. We slid into a booth by the window. Emily sat across from me, peeling off her coat and shaking out her hair like she owned the place. She glanced at me with a knowing smile, the kind that says, go ahead, fall apart if you need to. I'll be right here. The waitress came over, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes but a kind smile. She placed 2 menus in front of us but didn't bother asking what we wanted to drink. She'd already seen Emily eyeing the coffee pot. Coffee for you both? She asked, her voice warm and familiar. Yes, ma'am, Emily said with a grin. And keep it coming. The waitress nodded, filled 2 cups, and left without asking any more questions. I like that about diners. No one asked questions. No one cared why you were sitting there at 11 p.m. with puffy eyes and a broken heart. They just poured your coffee and let you be. I wrapped my hands around the warm cup, letting the heat sink into my fingers. I didn't drink it right away. I just held it. It felt good to hold something warm, something steady. So, Emily said, her eyes narrowing on me like a detective about to crack a case. What's the plan? I raised an eyebrow at her. What plan? Don't play dumb, Rachel, she said, stirring sugar into her coffee. You're not going back to that house. We both know that. I opened my mouth to argue but nothing came out. She was right. I wasn't going back. I told myself I could, that I'd just sleep on it, that maybe we'd work it out like people always say. But sitting here, far from him, far from it all, I knew there was nothing left to work out. There was no we anymore. Just me. Just him. Separate. Part. Yeah, I muttered, taking a slow sip of my coffee. It was too hot, burned my tongue, but I didn't care. I'm not going back. Good, Emily said, pointing at me with her spoon like she just won a bet. So what's next? You want to stay with me for a while? Or you thinking something bigger? Bigger. I frowned, setting my cup down. Yeah, bigger, she said, leaning forward like she was about to tell me a secret. You've been playing good wife, good mom, good everything for 10 years, Rachel. You finally get to be selfish. You get to be big. You get to take up space. So what do you want to do? Not for him. Not for the kids. Not for anyone else. For you. Her words hit me harder than Ethan's betrayal ever could. I blinked at her, my throat tight. What did I want? I didn't even know. I'd spent so much of my life being something for someone else. A wife, a mother, a helper, a fixer. I didn't even know what I wanted anymore. I hadn't thought about myself in so long. It was like looking at a blank canvas and being told to paint anything. Too much freedom can be just as terrifying as none at all. I don't know, I admitted, my voice quieter than I intended. Emily leaned back in her seat, sipping her coffee like she had all the time in the world. That's okay, she said. You'll figure it out. But I'll tell you one thing. You're not gonna figure it out sitting in a house full of his memories. Her words settled into me like stones in water, sinking deeper with every second. She was right. I didn't know what I wanted, but I knew I didn't want that. I didn't want to sleep in the bed where he'd come home smelling like someone else. I didn't want to sit at that kitchen table where I'd smiled at him while he'd been texting her. I didn't want to fold his clothes, wash his dishes, or breathe the same air he'd polluted with his lies. I took another sip of coffee, this time letting the warmth coat my throat, letting it fill me from the inside out. You know, I said slowly, my eyes distant as I stared out the window. I've always wanted to see California. Emily raised an eyebrow, a grin tugging at the corner of her mouth. California, huh? Yeah. I nodded, feeling the weight of it settle into my chest like something real, something I could hold on to. Sunshine. Beaches.
No snow.
Just freedom. Emily laughed, tilting her head back. I like it, she said, her eyes sparkling. California it is. I smiled, small at first, but then it grew. Felt good to say it out loud. Felt good to want something for once, something just for me. It felt dangerous, like standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing you might fall but also knowing you might just fly. The waitress came back, notepad in hand. You ladies ready to order? She asked. Emily didn't hesitate. 2 big plates of pancakes, bacon on the side, and extra syrup. The waitress nodded, jotting it down. Anything else? Yeah, Emily said, glancing at me with a mischievous grin. Can you make them look like they belong on a celebration plate? My sister just got her life back tonight. The waitress glanced between us, eyebrows raised, but she didn't ask questions. She just smiled. Coming right up. I sat back, letting the warmth of the diner settle into my bones. For the first time all day, I didn't feel like I was running. I didn't feel like I was falling. I felt still. I felt present. California. I'd never seen it. Never even thought I'd have the chance. But now, for the first time in a long time, it felt possible. Anything felt possible. Ethan's name lit up my phone screen again. I didn't even hesitate. I blocked him with 2 taps.
No dramatic speeches.
No final words. Just block. Emily saw it and raised her coffee cup like she was toasting me. About damn time, she said, smiling wide. I lifted my cup, tapping it against hers. To California, I said, grinning for real this time. To you, she corrected, her voice full of pride. To whatever comes next. We drank. The pancakes came soon after, warm and golden, drowning in syrup. For the first time in years, I didn't feel guilty for eating every last bite. I didn't feel guilty for anything. After we finished eating, Emily paid the bill despite my weak protest. She didn't even look at me when I tried to argue. She just handed the waitress her card, raised one finger and said, "Don't." So I didn't. I just sat back and watched her handle it the way she always did, calm, steady, and completely in control. I wished I could borrow some of that from her. But maybe I didn't need to borrow it. Maybe I just needed to remember I'd always had it in me. It had just been buried under years of compromise and self-sacrifice. We walked out of the diner, the cold night air hitting us hard after being wrapped in the warmth of syrup and coffee. I shoved my hands into my coat pockets and tilted my head back to look at the sky. It was clear, the stars sharp and bright, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel small under it. Emily unlocked the car, and I slid into the passenger seat. She didn't start the engine right away. Instead, she sat there, gripping the steering wheel like she was thinking about something important. I glanced at her, waiting, but I knew better than to rush her. Emily didn't speak until she had her words lined up just right. Finally, she looked at me, her dark eyes steady. "Do you want me to help you pack your stuff tomorrow?" Her words hung in the air between us, heavier than I expected. I hadn't even thought that far ahead. Pack my stuff. My stuff. Not our stuff. Mine. My clothes. My shoes. My books. My life. All mine. I sat with it for a moment, feeling it settle into my chest. It felt different than it had earlier. Before, it felt like running away. Now it felt like claiming something, taking something back. "Yeah," I said quietly, nodding as I stared straight ahead. "Yeah, ido." Emily smiled, slow and satisfied, like she'd been waiting for me to say those words all night. "All right then," she said, turning the key in the ignition. The engine rumbled to life. "Tomorrow we burn it all down." I laughed, even though I wasn't sure if she was joking or not. Knowing Emily, she probably wasn't. We drove back to her apartment, which was small but cozy in that I don't have kids so my space stays clean kind of way. It smelled like vanilla candles and fresh laundry. She tossed her keys on the counter and waved me toward the couch. "Guest room's yours if you want it," she said, nodding down the hall. "But if you want to stay up and watch trash TV with me, I'm not gonna stop you." I thought about it for a second. The exhaustion from the day was finally catching up with me, but something about sitting on that couch, eating popcorn, and watching people argue on reality TV felt right. Like exactly what I needed. I kicked off my shoes, tossed my coat on the back of the chair, and plopped down on the couch. "Trash TV sounds perfect," I said, grabbing one of the throw blankets she had folded on the side. It smelled like fabric softener and home. "Good choice," Emily said, grinning as she sat down next to me and flipped on the TV. She scrolled through the channels until she found some ridiculous dating show where grown adults screamed at each other over miscommunication. I snorted as one man flipped a table, and Emily cackled so loud I thought she might fall off the couch. "Honestly, this show is more entertaining than half the movies I've seen this year," she said, wiping tears from her eyes. "Right," I said, still laughing. "It's like they know they're being ridiculous, but they just lean into it." "Exactly," Emily said, tossing a piece of popcorn into her mouth. "They know they're the villains, but they're like, might as well be the best villain of the season." I leaned back, letting the warmth of the blanket, the couch, and Emily's laughter wash over me. It felt safe. Safer than I'd felt in a long time.
No pretending.
No performing. No walking on eggshells. Just me, my sister, and two strangers screaming at each other on TV like their whole lives depended on it. It was ridiculous and perfect. At some point I must have fallen asleep. I didn't remember closing my eyes, but when I woke up, the TV was playing soft reruns of an old sitcom, and Emily was snoring softly on the other end of the couch. Her head was tilted back, mouth open just a little, like she'd been knocked out mid-laugh. I didn't want to wake her, so I just sat there in the quiet for a while. The light from the TV flickered across the room, making shadows dance on the wall. I stared at those shadows, feeling the weight of everything I'd been through today. The anger was still there, humming low and steady beneath my skin. But there was something else now. Something softer. Relief. For the first time in a long time, I didn't have to worry about him walking in the door. I didn't have to brace myself for the sound of his phone buzzing at 2 a.m. or wonder who was on the other end. I didn't have to smile through the doubt. I didn't have to be strong for anyone but me. I ran my thumb over the spot where my wedding ring used to be. The skin still felt raw, like it was still adjusting to being free. I wondered how long it would take for that little indentation to fade. Maybe it wouldn't. Maybe it would stay there forever as a reminder. But maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. Maybe it would remind me of what I survived. I thought about Natalie. I wondered if she was still sitting by her phone, waiting for Ethan to text her. I wondered if she felt powerful like she'd won. I almost laughed at the thought. She didn't win. She just volunteered for my place in line. One day, she'd be the one finding receipts in his pocket. One day she'd be calling a store to ask questions she already knew the answers to. She just didn't know it yet. My eyes grew heavier as I sat there watching the shadows shift. I didn't fight it this time. I let them close, let the weight of it all press me down into the couch. But this weight was different. It wasn't crushing me anymore. It was just there. Part of me. Part of my story. But not the whole story. The whole story hadn't been written yet. I'd spent so long being afraid of what would happen if everything fell apart. Afraid of what it would mean if he ever cheated. Afraid of what it would mean if I had to start over. But now that it had happened, now that I was here, I realized something I hadn't expected. I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of him. Not of being alone. Not of having to rebuild. I'd already done the hardest part. I'd walked away. The rest? The rest was just life. And for the first time in a long time it was mine. I fell asleep to the sound of Emily's soft snores and the quiet hum of the TV. And for the first time in years I slept without dreaming about him. The next morning, Emily woke me up with the smell of fresh coffee and the sound of bacon sizzling in the kitchen. I sat up, rubbing my eyes, still groggy but somehow more awake than I'd been in months. I stretched, joints popping in that satisfying way that only happens after a deep sleep. "Breakfast of champions," Emily announced, sliding a plate of bacon, eggs, and toast onto the coffee table in front of me. She plopped down next to me with her own plate, grinning like she just conquered the world. "Champion, ou?" I said, taking a piece of bacon and crunching down on it. "Hell yeah," she said, stuffing a forkful of eggs into her mouth. "Today's a big day, baby sister. We got a house to clear out and a life to start over." I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt something warm settle in my chest. Love. Pure, uncomplicated love. I'd been so focused on what I'd lost I'd forgotten all the things I still had. People who showed up. People who didn't leave. People like Emily. "Yeah," I said, smiling as I took another bite of bacon. "Let's burn it all down." She raised her coffee cup like it was a toast, and I clinked mine against it. "To the ashes," she said with a grin. "To new beginnings," I replied, my voice steady, my heart stronger than it had been in a long, long time. We ate. We packed. And I didn't look back. After breakfast, we got dressed and headed back to my house. I thought I'd feel something walking through that front door. Maybe sadness, maybe regret, maybe one last flicker of hope that somehow, someway this could be fixed. But when I stepped inside, all I felt was nothing.
No nostalgia. No grief.
Just the cold, stale air of a place that no longer belonged to me. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was hollow. Like a shell of a life I'd already walked away from. Emily stepped in behind me, her eyes sharp and focused like she was walking into enemy territory. Her gaze swept the room, her lips pressing into a tight line. "All right," she said, hands on her hips like a general preparing for battle. "Where do you want to start? Clothes? Bathroom? Kitchen? Bedroom?" I said without hesitation. "I want my clothes, my jewelry, and anything that's mine. He can keep the rest." "Bold move," she said with a grin. "I like it." I marched up the stairs, my feet hitting each step harder than I needed to. Like I was stomping out every ounce of doubt still lingering inside me. I could feel Emily behind me, close but not hovering. She wasn't here to baby me. She was here to back me up. When I opened the bedroom door, the sight of it hit me differently than I expected. The bed, still unmade from the night before, looked so small. Too small for everything that had happened in it. I could still see the indents of where he'd slept. His pillow was tilted slightly, just like always. The drawer on his side of the nightstand was half open, like he'd grabbed something and forgotten to close it. It was such a stupid, mundane detail, but it stuck with me. It made me wonder how many times I'd cleaned up after him without even realizing it. How many times I'd fixed the little things he couldn't be bothered to fix himself. "Hey," Emily said softly, her voice pulling me back. "You good?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. I was good in the sense that I wasn't going to cry, but I wasn't good in the sense that I wasn't angry. And maybe that was okay. Maybe I didn't have to be good right now. I walked over to the closet and yanked it open. His clothes were on the left, mine on the right. It had been that way since we moved in together. At first I thought it was cute. His side, her side. But looking at it now, it just felt symbolic of the whole damn relationship. Him on one side, me on the other, pretending we were sharing something that was never really shared at all. I grabbed my suitcase from the floor of the closet and unzipped it with more force than necessary. Then I started pulling clothes off hangers. Shirts, jeans, dresses. Everything that belonged to me went in the bag. I didn't fold a single thing. I didn't care if it got wrinkled. I just wanted it out. Emily moved next to me, pulling down shoes and tossing them into a second bag she'd grabbed from the hallway closet. She didn't ask questions. She didn't say anything like, "Are you sure about this?" Because she knew I was. She knew I'd reached that point of no return. "You taking the jewelry?" she asked, glancing at the little mirrored box on the dresser. I paused, my hand still gripping a stack of sweaters. My eyes flicked to the jewelry box, the one Ethan had bought me for our 5th anniversary. At the time I thought it was romantic. He'd told me, "You deserve something beautiful to hold all your treasures." The memory made me feel sick now. I didn't want to touch it. I didn't want anything from him. But my jewelry? My necklaces, my rings, the little bracelet my mom had given me before she died? Those were mine. "Yeah," I said, walking over to the dresser. I opened the box and started pulling out everything that belonged to me. My fingers moved fast, my heart beating even faster. I didn't look at each piece. I didn't think about it. I just grabbed earrings, bracelets, pendants. One by one, they went into a small pouch I'd found in the bottom of the box. And then I saw it. The bracelet. The one he'd given me just yesterday. The one I thought had been bought for me. My fingers hovered over it, a spark of rage flaring in my chest. I picked it up, turning it over in my hands. It was beautiful, I couldn't deny that. Gold and diamonds, delicate but strong. But now all I could see was her wearing it. Natalie. Her name burned in my mind like a brand. "Happy anniversary, love." "Don't pack that," Emily said from behind me, her voice low and dangerous. "That one stays." I turned to look at her, confusion crossing my face. "Leave it right there," she said, pointing at the middle of the dresser. "So every time he walks in this room, he sees it and remembers what he lost. Every single day." I blinked, surprised at how much sense it made. I placed the bracelet down slowly, right in the center of the dresser. It looked so small sitting there, but it might as well have been a grenade. "Yeah," I said softly, stepping back like it might explode. "Let him have that." The packing went faster after that. I moved like a woman possessed, clearing out drawers, grabbing toiletries from the bathroom, stuffing every part of my life into 2 suitcases and a duffel bag. Every item I pulled from a drawer felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. The t-shirt I'd worn on our first date? Mine. The hoodie he always stole from me? Mine. My perfume, my face creams, my books, all of it mine. Emily didn't slow down once. She moved like she was on a mission, tossing bottles of shampoo, curling irons, and makeup into bags with the precision of a soldier clearing a battlefield. She didn't ask questions. She didn't get sentimental. And I loved her for it. By the time we were done, there were 3 bags by the front door. I stared at them, feeling both exhausted and exhilarated at the same time. My whole life was in those bags. 10 years packed up in less than an hour. "You ready?" Emily asked, tossing her car keys in the air and catching them with a grin. "Yeah," I said, my eyes still on the bags. "Yeah, I'm ready." We carried them out to the car and I didn't look back. Not once. Not at the house. Not at the porch where Ethan had begged me last night. Not at the kitchen window where I'd spent years watching him pull into the driveway, believing he was coming home to me. He wasn't my home anymore. As I tossed the last bag into Emily's trunk, I felt a surge of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not relief. Not anger. Not sadness. Power. Pure, undeniable power. I climbed into the passenger seat, buckled my seatbelt, and glanced at Emily. She raised her eyebrows at me like she was waiting for the signal. "Where to, boss?" she asked with a grin. I thought about it for a second. I could go to her place. I could stay with her for as long as I needed. She'd made that clear. But something inside me didn't want that. Something inside me wanted more. Bigger. "Take me to the bank," I said, a plan already forming in my mind. Her eyebrows shot up in surprise. "The bank? Yep, I said, sitting up straighter, my voice sharper than it had been all day. I'm pulling my name off every joint account. Every card. Every bill. I'm not leaving him with a single cent of my money. Emily let out a low whistle, nodding with approval. Damn, Rachel. You're ruthless. I glanced at her, a slow smile spreading across my face. Not ruthless, I said, turning back toward the road. Just done. She laughed, hitting the gas. And as we drove away from that house, away from him, from all of it, I didn't feel broken anymore. I didn't feel weak. I felt free. No more waiting for him to come home. No more checking his phone for answers I already knew. No more second-guessing my worth. He lost me. I didn't lose anything. The drive to the bank was quiet, but it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was the kind of silence that comes after a storm, when the air is still heavy but everything feels clean, fresh, and new. I stared out the window, watching familiar streets blur into the background. The houses, the cars, the people walking their dogs. It all looked the same as it had yesterday, but I felt different. Everything felt different. Emily glanced at me every now and then but didn't push me to talk. She didn't have to. She knew I was in my head sorting through it all. Sometimes silence is better than advice. You sure you want to do this today? She asked as we pulled into the parking lot of the bank. We can wait if you need a breather. I shook my head.
No.
I want it done. I want everything done. She nodded, cutting the engine. All right then. Let's get it done. I didn't hesitate. I got out of the car, straightened my coat, and walked toward the bank doors like I owned the whole building. Emily was right behind me, hands in her pockets, eyes sharp like she was ready to swing if anyone even looked at me wrong. The doors slid open with a soft whoosh, and the warm air of the bank hit me. It smelled like carpet cleaner and fresh paper. That sterile corporate smell you only find in banks and offices. I walked straight to the counter where a woman in a navy blue blazer was typing on a computer. She glanced up at me with a polite smile. Hi, how can I help you today? I need to close my joint accounts, I said, my voice steady and firm.
Nos checking. No está mering.
Her smile faltered, her eyebrows lifting just a little.
Oh, okay.
We can definitely help with that. Do you have your ID with you? I pulled my wallet from my bag and handed her my driver's license. She took it, glancing at it before typing something into the computer. I could feel Emily standing a few feet behind me, not saying a word, but I knew she was there. Solid. Steady. Are you looking to close all accounts or just specific ones? The woman asked, still typing. All of them, I said without hesitation. Savings, checking, credit. If my name is on it, I want it gone. Her fingers paused on the keyboard, and she glanced at me like she wasn't sure if I knew what I was doing. I know exactly what I'm doing, lady. Okay, she said carefully. Since it's a joint account, I'll need both parties' authorization to close it, but I can remove your name from all accounts today. You'll no longer have any responsibility for the balance or any future transactions. That's exactly what I want, I said, folding my arms. All right, she said, nodding. This might take a few minutes. I stood there watching her fingers fly across the keyboard, feeling a calmness settle over me. Each keystroke felt like the sound of a chain snapping. One link at a time, the weight of it all started to lift. I'd spent so many years thinking I needed to be attached to Ethan to be whole. Joint accounts, shared credit cards, Mr. and Mrs. Cooper on every piece of mail. But now I realized those ties had only ever been chains. And chains were meant to be broken. She printed out a stack of papers and slid them across the counter. Sign here, here, and here, she said, pointing at each line. I signed every line without hesitation. No second thoughts.
No regrets.
By the time I was done, my hands felt lighter. All right, Rachel, she said, sliding the papers back toward her. You're officially removed from all joint accounts. Is there anything else I can help you with today? Actually, yes, I said, tilting my head. Can you tell me how much is left in the checking account? The woman blinked, clearly not expecting that question. Give me just a second. She tapped at her computer, squinting at the screen. There's $4,236.18 in the checking and $1,150 in the savings. I smiled slow and sharp. Perfect. Withdraw half of it. Her eyes flicked up to me, unsure. Since the accounts are still active, I technically can't authorize a split withdrawal without permission from both parties. Don't worry, I said, leaning in just a little, my voice lower now but steady as steel. I'm not asking for permission. I'm taking what's mine. Her eyes darted to Emily, who raised an eyebrow as if to say, don't try her today. The woman hesitated for a moment but nodded. All right. Give me 1 second. I watched as she clicked away, her expression tense but professional. It didn't matter if she thought I was being petty or dramatic. She didn't know the whole story. She didn't know that I'd folded that man's clothes, washed his dishes, paid his bills, and carried his weight for 10 years. I wasn't being petty. I was reclaiming everything I'd given up. Would you like that in cash or deposited into another account? She asked. Cash, I said. All cash. Her eyebrows lifted, but she didn't question it. She printed the withdrawal slip, had me sign one more time, and then disappeared into the back. When she returned, she had a white envelope stuffed with bills. She counted them in front of me, 20s, 50s, and 100s, all crisp and clean. Here you go, she said, sliding the envelope toward me. $2, 118.09. I took the envelope and slipped it into my bag. It wasn't about the money. It was about the principle. About taking back what was mine. Thank you, I said, giving her a smile that probably looked more like a warning. She nodded, her eyes darting to Emily one last time. She knew. She knew exactly what kind of day this was. We walked out of the bank, and as soon as the doors closed behind us, Emily let out a low whistle. Cash, huh? That was bold. I shrugged, pulling the envelope from my bag and fanning out the bills. I figured if I'm burning it all down, I might as well fund the fire. Emily threw her head back and laughed so loud a man walking by glanced at us like we'd lost our minds. Maybe we had. But it felt good. Felt right. We got back in the car, and I sat there for a second, the envelope still in my lap. I stared at it, my fingers running over the edges. I thought about every excuse Ethan had ever given me. Every time he'd said, I'm just stressed about money, babe. Every time he'd claimed he needed to work late to make ends meet. Every lie. I pulled one of the $100 bills out of the stack, folded it neatly, and shoved it into the glove compartment of Emily's car. She raised an eyebrow at me. What's that for? She asked. For you, I said simply. Gas, snacks, bail money. Whatever we need. She grinned so wide I thought she might break something. Bail money, huh? Just in case, I said, leaning back in the seat with a grin of my own. Man, Emily said, shaking her head as she pulled out of the parking lot. I like this new version of you. She's dangerous. Not dangerous, I said, watching the city pass by through the window. Just done. She nodded, her eyes still on the road. Well done, looks good on you. We didn't say much on the way back to her apartment. We didn't need to. I sat there feeling something I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't joy. It wasn't peace. It was something stronger. It was control. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for someone else to decide my fate. I wasn't asking for permission. I wasn't clinging to what ifs or maybe one days. I was driving my own life again. No more begging. No more waiting. No more being small to make someone else feel big. I leaned my head against the window, eyes closed, lips curling into a smile so soft it felt like a secret. California still calling your name? Emily asked as she turned the wheel. I opened my eyes and glanced at her. Yeah, I said, my voice steady. I think it's about time, I answered. The road stretched ahead of us, open and wide. For the first time I didn't feel lost. I felt free. The next few days passed in a blur of boxes, phone calls, and quiet moments of clarity. It was strange how quickly a life could be packed away. You think it'll take weeks, maybe months, to pull yourself out of a 10-year relationship, but it doesn't. Takes hours. Just hours. Couple of boxes. A couple of trash bags. Some things you keep. Some things you throw away. And some things you leave behind like ghosts so they can haunt the person who deserves them. Emily was with me every step of the way. She didn't hover or push me to talk, but she was there, steady as always. She carried boxes, tossed old t-shirts into donation bags, and cracked jokes just loud enough to make me laugh when I didn't think I had it in me. You sure you don't want to burn some of this? She asked, holding up one of Ethan's old hoodies with that look on her face. The one that meant I'm absolutely serious, but I'll pretend it's a joke if you want me to. I glanced at the hoodie, a faded navy blue one he used to wear on lazy Sundays. I remembered how I used to love it. I used to steal it, pulling it over my head just to smell him when he wasn't home. But now looking at it, all I saw was her touching him. Her hands on his shoulders. Her perfume mixing with his. "Burn it," I said, tossing it into the trash pile. Emily grinned like she just won the lottery. "Now you're speaking my language." By the time we were done, the house looked unfamiliar.
Bara walls.
Empty shelves. It didn't even feel like a home anymore. It felt like a place that had been stripped of its purpose, hollowed out until it was nothing but a shell. I stared at it for a while, hands on my hips, heart strangely calm. "Not much left to do," Emily said from behind me, wiping her hands on her jeans. She glanced around, tilting her head like she was appraising a job well done. "Anything else you want to take with you?" I looked around one last time. The couch where we'd sat on movie nights. The kitchen table where I'd served him dinner more times than I could count. The photo frame still hanging on the wall, holding pictures of a life that didn't exist anymore. "No," I said quietly, turning toward the door. "He can have it all." Emily nodded like she'd expected that answer. We stepped outside into the cold afternoon air. And I breathed it in deep, letting it fill my lungs. It felt sharper than it should have, cleaner somehow. I wasn't sure if it was just the cold, or if it was the weight of everything I'd left behind. I glanced over at Emily, who was already tossing the last trash bag into her trunk. "Where to now?" she asked, leaning against the car, arms crossed. I thought about it. I had options now. I could go to her place. I could get a hotel for the night. I could drive somewhere, anywhere, just to feel like I was in motion. But one word kept pushing its way to the front of my mind. "California," I said, smiling to myself. Emily raised an eyebrow, lips curling into a slow grin. "Oh, so you're serious about that, huh?" "Yeah," I said, my smile growing wider. "I think I am." Her eyes lit up like I'd just given her the best news of her life. She pushed off the car, clapping her hands together once. "All right then. Road trip it is." "Wait, what?" I turned to face her. "I didn't say anything about a road trip." "Didn't have to," she said, tossing her keys into the air and catching them with one hand. "You think I'm gonna let you drive to California by yourself? Please. You'd get halfway there, start second-guessing yourself, and turn back. I'm coming with you, end of story." I opened my mouth to argue, but nothing came out. She wasn't wrong. I probably would second-guess myself. I'd spent years second-guessing myself, doubting every instinct I'd ever had. But right now, looking at her, at the way she was already moving toward the driver's seat, like the decision had been made for both of us, I felt something shift inside me. "All right," I said, tossing my bag into the back seat. "But if you snore, I'm kicking you out of the car." She grinned as she slid behind the wheel. "Please, I'm a delightful road trip partner." We hit the road that same day. No big speeches.
No dramatic goodbyes.
Just the two of us, a tank full of gas, and enough snacks to survive a small apocalypse. The road stretched out in front of us, long and endless, but for once it didn't feel scary. It felt wide open, like the future itself was inviting me to start over. Emily played music, loud, ridiculous music, and we sang along until our voices cracked. She threw sunflower seeds at me when I missed a lyric, and I flicked an empty gum wrapper at her head in retaliation. It was stupid. It was childish. It was perfect. Hours passed. The sun dipped lower, turning the sky into a soft mess of pinks and oranges. We stopped at a rest stop, refueled, and sat on the hood of the car eating chips and drinking soda like teenagers sneaking out after curfew. At one point, Emily glanced over at me, chewing on a piece of licorice. "You realize you're a free woman now, right?" she said, giving me a side-eye look that was half smile, half serious. I didn't answer right away. I just let the words settle. A free woman. Sounded so simple. Too simple, really, for something that felt so massive. But it was true. No more waiting for him to come home. No more searching his phone for proof I didn't need. No more wondering if I was good enough, pretty enough. I nodded slowly, staring at the sun as it melted into the horizon. "Yeah," I said, letting out a long breath. "I know." She leaned back, crossing her arms behind her head like she was lounging on a beach. So, what's the first thing you're gonna do when we get to California? Big plans. I tilted my head thinking about it. I hadn't really thought that far ahead. I knew I wanted to go. I knew I wanted something new. But what did I actually want to do when I got there? The answer came to me so quickly it felt like it had been waiting for me to notice it. I'm gonna walk on the beach, I said. Shoes off. Feet in the sand. Just stand there. Emily raised an eyebrow. That's it. Yeah, I said, my voice firmer this time. That's it. All right, she said, nodding like it was the most logical thing in the world. Shoes off, feet in the sand. I can get behind that. I smiled to myself, feeling the weight of everything I'd carried for so long finally starting to fall away. Maybe I didn't have a 5-year plan. Maybe I didn't know where I was going to live, or what I was going to do. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going to stay small anymore. I wasn't going to live quietly, waiting for scraps of love from someone who didn't deserve me. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew exactly where I was not going. I wasn't going back. We drove through the night, stopping only for gas and coffee, and somewhere around 2 a.m., I leaned my head against the window and let sleep pull me under. I dreamed of sand under my feet, of the sound of waves crashing, and of the sun on my face.
No faces. No voices.
Just peace. Pure golden peace. When I woke up, the sky was lighter, and Emily was still driving, her eyes focused on the road like it owed her something. I rubbed my eyes, glancing out the window to see the world shifting from green to brown. The desert stretched out on both sides, wide and endless. I smiled, pulling the blanket tighter around my shoulders. We were getting closer. California, huh? Emily said, glancing over at me with a smirk. California, I repeated, feeling it settle on my tongue like a promise. Think you'll stay this time? She asked. I leaned my head back, watching the sun rise over the desert. Yeah, I said, my eyes never leaving the horizon. I think I will. The sun rose slowly, painting the sky in soft streaks of pink, orange, and gold. It wasn't like the sunrises back home, where everything felt muted and gray until noon. Out here in the middle of nowhere, the sun looked bigger, bolder, like it was reminding the world that every day was a new chance to start over. I leaned my head against the window, letting the warmth seep into my skin. My eyes were heavy, but I didn't want to sleep anymore. I wanted to see every inch of this drive. Emily was still at the wheel, one hand on the steering wheel, the other lazily tapping the beat of a song only she could hear. Her hair was a mess of loose curls falling around her face, and her eyes had that tired but determined look she always got when she was too stubborn to quit. She'd been driving for hours with no complaints. You need me to take over? I asked, my voice groggy from sleep. Emily glanced at me, smirking. You offering, or you just being polite? Offering, I said, sitting up straighter and stretching my arms. My back ached from sleeping in the car, but it was a good ache. The kind that tells you you've been moving forward. Nah, I'm good, she said, her eyes flicking back to the road. I'm on a mission now, and you know I don't stop once I'm locked in. I shook my head, laughing under my breath. Yeah, I know. It was true. Emily was like a freight train once she decided on something.
No brakes. No hesitaschen.
It used to drive me crazy when we were kids, but now I saw the beauty in it. She didn't doubt herself. Not for a second. We drove in silence for a while, but it wasn't the heavy kind of silence that makes you feel like you should say something. It was the peaceful kind. The kind that lets you breathe. Every now and then I'd glance at her, and she'd catch me and flash that quick grin of hers. The one that said, I see you and I got you. The desert stretched out on both sides of the highway, endless and open. There was nothing but dirt, shrubs, and the occasional rusted-out car sitting on the side of the road like a forgotten memory. I stared out at it all, thinking about how empty it looked but how free it felt.
No fences. No walls.
Just open space as far as the eye could see. I wanted that kind of openness in my life. No more cages, no more waiting for permission to move. Still thinking about California? Emily asked, glancing at me with a knowing look. Yeah, I said, nodding slowly. I think I need it. Need it, huh? She said, tapping the steering wheel with one finger. That's different from want. You're serious this time. I didn't even have to think about it. Yeah, I am. Emily smiled, eyes on the road. Good. I'm glad. We stopped at a gas station just before the state line. It was one of those old rundown places where the pumps looked like they hadn't been updated since the 90s. The kind of place that smelled like motor oil, cigarettes, and hot pavement. I got out of the car, stretching my legs and letting the warm desert air hit me full force. It wasn't the sharp cold of back home. This was different. Dry but not suffocating. Warm but not oppressive. It felt like standing in front of a fire, just close enough to feel the heat but not close enough to burn. Emily popped the trunk and started rummaging through the bags, looking for snacks. I glanced at the gas pump, watching the numbers roll up slowly, and for some reason, it felt like the most satisfying thing I'd seen all day. Progress. Movement. One number after another, always going forward. You want anything from inside? Emily called, holding up a bottle of water she'd pulled from the cooler in the back. Yeah, grab me something salty, I said, leaning against the side of the car. Chips, pretzels, whatever. You're easy to please, she said, shaking her head like she didn't believe it. But she was wrong. I hadn't been easy to please in years. I just learned to make myself smaller, quieter, less of a problem. But that version of me was gone now, burned up in the ashes of what I left behind. While she was inside, I leaned back against the car, letting my head tilt up to the sky. It was so blue, endless and wide, like the whole world had been stretched out just for me. I closed my eyes, letting the sun hit my face. I didn't care if it burned. I wanted to feel it. All of it. The heat. The light. The everything. When I opened my eyes, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the car window. For a second, I didn't recognize myself. My face looked the same brown eyes, same tired expression, same messy hair. But something was different. Something in my eyes. They looked steady. Like I wasn't afraid anymore. Emily came back a few minutes later, tossing a bag of pretzels at me. I caught it midair, grinning as I opened it. Got you the big bag, she said, holding up her own bag of sour gummy worms. Road trip rules. No small snacks allowed. Appreciate it, I said, popping a pretzel into my mouth. We sat on the hood of the car for a little while, watching other cars pull in and out of the lot. A family of 4 climbed out of an old minivan. The kids running around like wild animals while their mom yelled at them to stay close. An older couple sat in a white sedan, sharing a bag of trail mix. It felt strange, seeing all these little snapshots of other people's lives. Everyone just living. No big drama. No heartbreak. Just living. You ever think about how normal people's lives are? I asked, still watching the family by the minivan. Emily snorted, tossing a gummy worm into her mouth. Normal people are boring, Ray. They think normal is the goal, but they don't realize it's a trap. She glanced over at me, one eyebrow raised. Normal's not for us, babe. I smiled at that, nodding slowly. Yeah, I think you're right. We sat there for a while longer before she hopped off the hood, dusting her hands on her jeans. All right, let's get moving. We're not stopping until we hit the beach. You promise? I asked, sliding off the car and grabbing my water bottle. She tilted her head, pretending to think about it. Yeah, I promise. Shoes off. Feet in the sand. Just like you said. I smiled so hard my cheeks hurt. Deal. The rest of the drive felt lighter somehow. The weight I'd been carrying for so long was gone. No more replaying arguments in my head. No more thinking about what I should have said. What I could have done differently. There was nothing to fix anymore. No relationship to save. No house to maintain. No man to convince that I was worthy of love. I was worthy of love. Period. We crossed the California state line, just as the sun hit its highest point. Emily honked the horn twice, grinning like a kid on Christmas morning. Welcome to California, baby, she yelled, smacking the steering wheel like it had done something amazing. I rolled down the window, letting the wind whip through my hair. It smelled different here, warmer, saltier, cleaner somehow. The road ahead stretched on forever, wide and open, and for once, I wasn't afraid of it. I leaned my head out the window, closed my eyes and screamed. Not from anger. Not from pain. Just because I could. I screamed until my lungs burned, until my voice cracked, until all the broken pieces of me scattered into the wind. Emily laughed so hard she almost swerved off the road. Feel better? She asked, eyes bright with mischief. I sat back in my seat, catching my breath. My heart was pounding. My chest felt lighter. Yeah. I said, smiling so wide it hurt. I do. We drove on, chasing the coastline, chasing the sun, chasing something we couldn't quite name, but knew we'd find when we got there. Shoes off. Feet in the sand. I'd get there. I'd get there soon.